Well, cool. Well, I'm here with Allyson, who's the VP of Marketing over at TrustRadius. And we're going to be talking about an interesting topic that always seems to get tons of debate and conversation, which is the whole gated versus ungated debate. But I think we're going to be going a little bit of a different perspective on this time. And I had a post last week that was interesting that Allyson and I were actually talking about back and forth that I think all of you will like to kind of hear a little bit more if you didn't see the post. So we're going to be talking about that. Before we get into that, Allyson, I wanted to, what I always do is take a quick little bit on TrustRadius. Most people know you guys are a software review site, but I'm sure there's other things TrustRadius does outside of that, or maybe you can expand on it a little bit. And then ultimately, who are you guys targeting? Because when we get into talking about maybe some marketing programs you guys are running, just so people can relate to, all right, who are these guys going after and what do they do? So maybe a little quick blurb on that would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So TrustRadius is a research and review platform for enterprise software. So really where we play in the kind of review platform space is we really focus on the enterprise and mid-market. And our platform is really positioned for the buyer. So we really think about the buying experience and making sure that they're getting all the content that they need upfront in a transparent, trusted way, so they can make the best software decision for themselves. And so I think that's really where we kind of separate ourselves, is that we're really positioned for the buyer and making sure that they have a positive experience and that they're buying the right software for their use cases and their business goals.
Which is huge these days. I mean, everyone wants to know, did you like it? Did you have a good experience? So, yeah.
And we do a lot of our proprietary research, and we find that buyers, at the end of the day, they don't really, they're all millennials, right? And they're all Gen Z, and even older generations are acting in the same way, where they're more digitally inclined. And that was even perpetuated even more by the pandemic. And so they want to do all their research online. They want to validate that with their peers. They want to hear from their peers. And then once they make a decision, right, or they make their short list, then that's when they actually want to engage with the sales team. And so I think that kind of dovetails really nice into our conversation about your content strategy and making sure that you're giving buyers what they want in a way that they can access it, they can validate that, and then and again, make that short list and then ultimately pick hopefully the right software for them.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love it. That kind of confirms some stuff that I definitely knew about it. And then in terms of who you guys target in a lot of your marketing programs, is it fairly broad? Is there a very specific ICP you guys always target, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so we usually go, so there's kind of there's probably two sides of it that we look at. Obviously a technology company, so is where we play. And then the companies that we usually go after are usually large enterprises that have a lot of products, and they really want to make sure that their products are in the right categories, they're being compared to the right people, and they're really trying to tell a differentiating story. And then we have more of the mid-market, and I call them kind of the disruptors, if you will, and they're trying to enter these categories. They're trying to be a disruptor in the market. And we have a lot of people that are, and then we have some SMBs as well that are trying to move up market. So they're trying to get the eyeballs of the enterprise and the mid-market as well, because we have such an array of content. It's really in depth. It's all vetted, unbiased. We work really, really hard to make sure that it's all really in-depth quality content, which kind of attracts that mid-market audience. And so it's kind of that marketplace that we've created. And then the personas within that, we work really well with obviously the executive suite. I think it's an interesting place when you're a B2B marketer, marketing to marketers. I love it. It's
the best, right?
Yeah, it's the best. It's so fun. It's such a great audience. And, at the end of the day, you think about, would I read this? Would I care about this? Does this motivate me to take an action? And so we have a lot of executive engagement and really what they care about is obviously their brand, building that brand preference and that market differentiation, and making sure that they're being shown in the best light, and that really matches their narrative. Because you get on, when you think about when a buyer is doing this research, it's not that they're not looking at your content. They're definitely looking at your content, but then you want your customers and anything on a third party forum to match that. So they're really concerned about, that brand narrative and making sure that's coming across to build that preference and that market differentiation. And then the other two people that we talk to a lot is the demand gen. side of the house, they're thinking about, okay, a review platform is essentially just another marketing channel for them.
Sure.
And so they're thinking about, how do I leverage that to build demand? And then customer marketers are usually the ones tasked to use the review platform to scale their program. So whether that is getting references, getting those customer stories, getting those customer quotes, et cetera. So they really use it as a tool within their tech stack to scale their programs. That ultimately feed into demand gen and feed the rest of the marketing team as well.
Love it. So enterprise, mid-market, generally marketers, but demand gen, and then also customer marketers, people that are definitely taking a lot of that social proof. Testimonials, a good thing people are saying, maybe using that on the website, all things like that. So Love it. All right, well, let's kind of get into it. Maybe I'll give a little bit of context in case you forgot what the post was about, and actually maybe for me too, just to refresh my mind. So I've got it on my left screen here that I'm looking at. But for anyone that's listening, so I posted this last week, and basically the perspective was this. It was CMOs don't ungate your content until you've thought about some of these things. And the whole idea was really just to create some additional detail, because there's a lot of nuance around ungating content, clearly. And some of the points that I had made were, a couple things are, is the content good enough really to ungate? A lot of times companies are guilty of creating content that's just kind of there to convert, but it doesn't really deliver a lot of value, or it's not that educational. It's more focused around the product. So there's those types of scenarios where sometimes ungating doesn't end up being the best idea. Then there's, really aligning with your CEO and understanding like, hey, like, are we measured on leads? Is it MQLs? Is it pipelines? Is it revenue? And making sure that's very clear, because if a lead or an MQL to you is someone who downloads a piece of content and then you turn that off, all of a sudden you could be in a very big problem in terms of reporting metrics. So there has to be that alignment all the way at the top to make sure that we're doing that. The other thing is just making sure you do the analysis, take a look at what's what, are we actually converting stuff well through the funnel? Are the leads that are coming in from some of these gated pieces of content actually converting into anything at the end of the day? And if they are, hey, great, maybe we should keep doing it. If not, maybe we should kind of reconsider if we continue running that campaign and pushing money towards it. And then the last really was just like tech stack considerations, resources that you have. You might have email nurtures and lead scoring and SDR teams following up on stuff and all these kind of inner working things. So you can't just, turn that all off immediately. That requires something very strategic to be all the way up to the top and made from typically the CEO or the VP of marketing. So that's what we talked about. And then obviously you chimed in, and we were going back and forth on a couple of things around your thoughts. And I think the first thing I wanted to maybe point on that I thought we could chat about is you had said, it's not really a question of like gate versus ungate. It's more like thinking about your goals around the campaign and how the content's going to get you there. So I thought we could start there to like maybe give your perspective or 2 cents on this whole continuous debate, or maybe if you want to take a different angle or slant on it, then we can go there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a great debate. And I think about content strategy in terms of, again, going back to the buying experience, and what 2 things that you want to do with your content is either you're trying to make sure that your target audience understands that they have a problem, or there's some kind of macro trend in the market that you're trying to tie yourself to, so that they understand that like, hey, this is something I need to pay attention to. So for instance, for TrustRadius, what we really lean into is this kind of this buyer that wants to self-serve. They want to find this information on their own. And this is a big trend that's happening, and we see it year over year, and it's only perpetuating as millennials become more and more dominant in the buying committee. And so this is this macro trend that I think B2B marketers should really pay attention to. And so all of our content that's around that, I think about it is like, I just want people to consume it, right? I don't necessarily need that. I don't need the lead gen part right? Because they're just thinking about how they have a problem. Right. Now, the other side of that is we create a report year over year. And so it's a big report. It has tons of data. We survey the millions of buyers that come to our site. We pull all these data points from them, and we synthesize that into these buyer trends that we're seeing in these buyer insights. And so we create this piece of content, right? This report actually feeds our content strategy when it comes to that thought leadership and tying ourselves to the macro trend in the market for the entire year, if not longer. And so when I think about the campaign, it's like there are tons of like stories and tidbits that you can pull from that report. You can put that into blogs and infographics, and you can think videos, et cetera. Like there's tons of ways that you can make content from that report that you want people just to consume. So you want to make sure it's SEO optimized. You want to make sure that you're promoting that on your social channels, et cetera. You're distributing it through your sales team. And then we have like a gated asset that we put a lot of paid behind. And that's where we're getting more of that like lead gen, if you will. So you're still thinking about, okay, I want people to consume this content because it's educational. I want them to understand that there's this big trend that's happening in the market that they need to pay attention to, right? But if they want more of like the in-depth insights and the all the data that's behind that, you give them more of a robust asset. And so you're thinking about the campaign where it's like, I want them to understand this trend. And then if they want more, they want to go in depth, they want more of that, the actual report, that's where your lead gen comes in. So thinking about it more from like a campaign strategy, like you can still kind of, you can still think about of people consuming the content and getting it just in an easy way and making sure they have a really positive experience. And then also think about like a lead gen component to each of your campaigns.
Yeah, maybe I missed it. Maybe I just have to kind of clarify. So like typically you mentioned like paid campaigns. So typically you would run more of a, lead gen based campaign pushing, say, this report that you talked about. I think you guys are running it maybe even right now. I saw a LinkedIn ad about this, but so typically you'll run lead gen forms on whatever channels. LinkedIn, let's say, is one channel, and then you'll have that report going. That's something that's more lead gen based, but then you're also opening up the content in other channels, or is it still gating it? Okay. Which channels? So like, how do you think about it? Like why gate it on LinkedIn and maybe not gate it on other channels?
Yeah. So I think with LinkedIn, it's really like, that's probably the most targeted that you can get around, specific personas. If you're thinking about just targeting your ICPs, that's probably where you can get the most granular. I think, when you think about display advertising, there's a lot of platforms out there that can help you get more targeted. So when I think about the actual campaign, they're just different content assets. So for instance, the report will pull, we did like an entire blog series that we promoted on organic, and we boosted posts and then we also created, that also went into like our email nurtures and things like that. But at the end of the day, what we put paid behind was like the lead gen on LinkedIn specifically, because we could get really targeted of who we wanted to actually download the report and have that lead gen component. Because I think when you think about your display advertising and distributing content through your display, really think about who, your activation platform that you're using, how well they can match to your ICP. I think I've kind of gotten into trouble where you try to get too targeted and you have like this really specific piece of content that you're trying to distribute and it just doesn't perform in display. So I'd rather like, okay, in display, that's more of where you probably want to do more of your branding campaign, pointing people to your website, something along those lines versus, like a pure like lead gen, and you're just not going to see the same quality as you will on like a platform like LinkedIn where you can get really where you can really focus.
Right. Well, I know you guys do both clearly because I've seen it. You guys also do some blog promotion too, which I've seen, and that traffic I've seen leads directly to the blog, and they can just read the content without filling out any lead form or information. So, is the thought process that reports that are kind of more higher value assets that maybe you spent X amount of time kind of putting together, so it's really unique proprietary insights versus maybe the blog is more your personal take perspective and trying to deliver some value to that audience? Is that kind of how you draw the line between the two?
Exactly.
You guys are doing a mixed bag, doing a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, because you could take that report and look at a lot of the data and come up with some of your own conclusions as well. And the blog are definitely like more of the commentary on that and some of the stories that we're pulling. I think the other thing that we've done with our blog is at the end of each of our blogs, it's kind of like we want the story to keep going, and we eventually want somebody to potentially get to like, if it's like a gated piece of content or some way that they're going to,
engage.
Engage with us and convert and become that lead. And so I think when you're again, like going back to the campaign and your content strategy, it's keeping the person interested and keep feeding them content. And eventually they'll convert if they want to. There's kind of two things I think about. It's like eventually they'll convert if they want to talk to you, right?
Sure.
And so like, and we all know the buyer's journey is not linear. So it's not like I'm looking at this funnel content, I'm looking at this mid funnel content.
Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? I would love that world. It'd be so easy.
Nobody consumes like that. And so what you want to make sure with your campaigns is that you're thinking about, I always kind of like, when I talk to my team, we think about a couple things. We think about the themes that we're trying to push out into the market and the story arcs around that and the content that ladders into it. Right. Yep. So we make sure that we're not over indexing in one area and not another. And then we think about, okay, is this the top of funnel, mid funnel, or bottom funnel piece of content? Not that someone's going to consume them in a linear fashion, but we're not over indexing on all this bottom funnel content. And we haven't really thought about, again, priming the market to understand that they even have a problem or that there's a solution to that problem. And then obviously TrustRadius supports it.
Right,
so when you think about your content strategy, think about buckets of like themes and topics and the story arc that you're trying to create. And then think about where somebody might be in their buyer's journey and try to, I guess, catalog, if you will, or put them into those buckets. You're not over indexing in one area versus another.
Right. Totally agreed. One thing you made me think of that's kind of interesting is we've been doing some testing around this is opening up the content and doing completely ungated and looking at consumption behavior. So a lot of times we'll look at, the amount of people that have gone to a certain page, and then sometimes it's scroll depth, other times it's just time on page, to have some type of metric of how many people actually consume this content. And then we might do the same thing and we might gate the asset and then only give access to the content for people that actually submit their information. And obviously one of those, the ungated version, provides not a lot of control. It doesn't provide you a touch point or an event back to say, hey, cool, this person's reading, this is who they are, now we can do something with them. So that's the unfortunate thing. But generally what we see is that the consumption is much higher a lot of times on assets. Like, for example, the blog, it would be honestly an interesting little experiment with a guide or something like that to have both of them side by side. I'm not sure if you've done that before, but if the goal is, hey, we created this awesome piece of content, ultimately we want people to consume it, but we also want to get their information. It's kind of like that tough balance between trying to make sure that as many people consume the information, right? Because that can, to your point, pull them into your story and get them to potentially consume more. But at the same time, you kind of got to, balance both worlds at the same time. So I'm curious if you guys done anything like that and see the same types of things with, ungated content versus gating the same piece, and then looking at different consumption trends across that content.
Right. So yeah, I think that's a great experiment. We actually haven't done that. One of the things that we've done is, and I'm a huge fan of this. So this is a great, like a same example of like, we build this really great report. And then we create the kind of ancillary content around it. So one of the things that we've done from I think you have to think about your SEO strategy, because when the more content you ungate, the more that you put it, you kind of create like either like your pillar pages around each, like a particular topic or something like that. They can really be SEO optimized, and that helps you, again, getting those eyeballs on that page. So I think it goes back to the goal of that piece of content and that campaign is it more important that these people are reading this and understanding the concepts, and then you can continue to reach them in a different way to get them to convert, and eventually talk to you, set that meeting, talk to your sales team, et cetera. But one thing we did, we have a really unique intent data offering. So, people come to TrustRadius are literally looking at your product or literally looking at your competitors. And this is really valuable intent signals that we work with our customers to activate. And so there's a ton of different types of intent data out there, and it's really confusing. And there's a lot of way that you can use different types of intent data for different types of campaigns. So we really wanted to be a thought leader in the intent data space. So we created an entire intent data pillar page is what we called it, but it's essentially a long form web page. And we put tons of content on there. And broke it out. It's pretty impressive what our team did. We consulted with an SEO agency. Now on that page, again, we want everybody to read that because we want people to understand the different types of intent data, the campaigns that they run against them, and how they should think about that in their larger go-to-market strategy. But then we have a downloadable asset. So it's an actual playbook. So now
is that like within the page, you mean? So they could start reading it, but then if they wanted to download at the end, then they could. So there's still that ability to have. Okay, got it. Yep.
Right, and there's multiple kind of points on the page that if you just wanted to download the actual ebook asset,
PDF or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And so I think that's a great way to think about it. Again, you can have the best of both worlds. It's essentially the same content, kind of repackaged. Way. And so you're still getting people to consume it. You're still thinking about your SEO strategy and trying to outrank your competitors. But then you have a downloadable asset if people want to actually, and then we, like I said, we kind of made this playbook where it was a checklist is in there. There's more, almost more workshop type content, if you will, or a workbook type of a thing.
Yeah. Love it.
And people can download that. And that's where you have that conversion. So again, it goes back to the campaign that we were thinking about. It's okay, we want everybody to understand we want there to kind of be demystification of intent data, and we're going to help that. We want to put that content out into the ether, and then we can also have a lead gen component. So, and I think every content marketer will say this, but it's not just one piece of content. It's the 10 pieces of content that you make from one concept. Right.
Always. Yeah. Which is that's the tough part, right? I mean, it's the whole repurposing, mindset. It's, Gary Vee's not the first one to talk about it. Thousands of marketers you got your pillar content, you split it up into a whole bunch of different types of content. Those could be videos, those could be clips, those could be micro posts on organic LinkedIn, all sorts of things, right? But ultimately all of them kind of lead back and tie up into the same core long form message, of which, to your point, you said it well, is attached to the core messaging themes that you want to communicate out into the market. So I think establishing those themes and then associating content with the themes, and then obviously then you've got the breakdown below, you get just a nice little diagram of exactly what you need to do. It's just the resources to break that all up does take some time depending on what you're doing. So
I think it's all about, and I totally agree with you. It's all about repurposing the content. And so I was actually just talking with my head of content marketing. Yeah. And the thing is too, is there's two things that you have to think about when you're thinking about your content strategy is one, you want to think of those themes and make sure that you're thinking about that story arc, because it can easily become very kind of one-off pieces of content, and they don't ladder into a theme, and it kind of say too many things out in the market, and people don't really it doesn't resonate.
They're confused. You
need to have that consistency with those themes and making sure okay, all of these pieces are laddering up into it. And then I think the second piece is just because you promoted it once doesn't mean that you can't promote it again. Exactly. And so I think that's we started this interview series with our CEO called Trust Talks, and we have all of this amazing video content, but I'm why can't we go back? There's tons of great content in here. Let's repurpose this and let's start re-promoting, right? And so I think that's also something just because you sent it out once and you put some paid behind it or organic or whatever you did, doesn't mean you can't go back and repurpose that and think of another way to package it up and put it out into the market. Because you're going relevant.
Yeah, you're going exactly down the road. And I saw you guys do this with one of your recent webinars. You guys had a little clip of it running, which I love that. That's great. I'd love to, we could dig into that campaign on another call, but it's exactly what you said, right? It's hey, did all this work, made a good webinar. We had some great speakers. We got some people to it. Great. We sent it out to our email nurture, whatever. Some other people watched it, et cetera. But then we just let it kind of die on our website is typically what happens. Right. And it's there's probably some valuable content there. And even if it happened 3 months ago, it's likely probably still fairly, relevant, unless it's something that was just, tied to a specific time of the year or something like that. So it's clip it up, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, something like that, whatever gives enough context for it to be kind of consumed in channel for somebody to get some value from it. And then what ends up happening is then you increase the consumption tenfold. I mean, we had an example where we had, I think, it's like 63 registrants show to a webinar. And then I believe we promoted it with about $3,000 on LinkedIn. It was a couple of different clips we ran, and then had, I think, 75% of the people watched the video. There's a 2-minute clip, and increased the views by something like 11,000 additional people saw at least a portion of the webinar. Plus, of course, people clicked the ad and then they watched the actual webinar ungated on the website. So you just got to think about like that. And I totally agree with what you said there. Smart.
Yeah. I think webinars are like, I totally agree. Well, and, so I kind of, with my demand gen person, talk about gated, ungated. Yeah. So I'm like, just ungate the webinar, because like,
sure.
We did the lead gen component of it. Like great. Like now it's just like, now it's on our website. Let's promote it. Let's have the clips. Let's get them to like if they want to watch the entire thing. But why stop somebody from watching the entire thing? We're already putting the clips online. We already did the lead gen component for it. I think you said this at the very beginning. What you have to watch out for is, again, like your metrics and making sure you can capture those people at some point in their buyer's journey. And so and I think there's like the building of demand, which is probably when you're thinking about, okay, like let's create a lot of content. Let's put this out into the market, et cetera. And then there's the capturing of demand, which is like, okay, the lead gen component and actually catching it when they're ready to make a purchase. And so, we think a lot about that. We actually just partnered with a vendor to help us with our own first party data asset, like intent asset. So when people are coming to our website, how are we capturing that, even though they're not authenticating? And then how do we go back and retarget them? How do we go back and have that, a list for our SDRs to start prospecting, put that into nurture campaign. So I think that when you are ungating things and you still have to have a way and a plan of how you're going to capture demand and then act on that. I think that's where maybe the pitfall is like, great, I've created all this demand. I've gotten all these people to read, our blogs, like all of our content consumption is really, really high, but you're not really seeing, at the end of the day, it's pipeline. You're not really seeing those meetings happen. You're not seeing them convert into pipeline. Then you're like, okay, well, there's a gap here where I'm not capturing the demand. And so that's something really to think about in your strategy. And you mentioned it, and aligning, with those as a CMO, going to the CEO, and going to the sales, like that's going to be a really hard conversation if you're like, hey, look at all these amazing that only marketing.
Exactly.
And they're like, cool.
100%.
So you have to make sure that middle piece of actually capturing it is in your plan. And it's communicated, and you're setting those expectations, because it could also take time, right?
Right.
It takes time. So
agreed.
We're really going to be focused on creating this demand and changing the perception in the market. There's going to be this gap period where we're not going to be able, like, it's just not going to convert as fast as we want it to.
Right.
6 months from now, I have a plan to capture that demand that will hit our bottom line. So think about that. I would think about it and really set those expectations with your head of sales and your CEO.
Gosh, you said so many great things there. I want to dive off into 3 completely different side conversations. So I'm trying to keep myself focused here, but I want to hit on at least one thing you said, which is goals. And I guess the couple things to think about, at least the things that we see a lot of times, is historically, and I think this has honestly changed a lot. I think a lot of people keep talking about VPs of marketing that are only measured on MQLs. I think that's changed for the majority of VPs of marketing. That's kind of an old school thought process. I haven't talked to a VP of marketing in a while that's like solely just looks at MQLs anymore. It seems like everyone now is pretty much at minimum probably looking at the full demand funnel, right? Clearly you're looking at leads and MQLs, you're looking at SQLs, you're looking at pipeline, all the typical stuff, but most are ultimately moved to more of making sure we're obviously optimizing for pipeline and revenue, and that our spend is resulting in some good ROI. But I think that historically, and maybe we just chat about this for a second, I don't know if this was the case maybe before you were at TrustRadius or during your time at TrustRadius, but many times people run gated content because for a while leads or MQLs were just gated content downloads. So that kind of forced marketers' hands a little bit, that they needed to run those types of programs, that they needed to go after managers or specialists or lower level titles to drive down the CPL and get as many leads as possible, ultimately to make their lead number. Because that's just the way that the demand funnel worked, right? And that's if you looked at the conversion rates, you needed that level of quantity, the quantity of leads to actually, get an outcome that you wanted. But now, obviously, when you're focused on pipeline, then now there's maybe a little bit less focus on that, is what we're seeing across a number of people, where not completely moving away from gated, but a lot more open up content, reducing friction, making things easier to consume for people, and starting to see better results in terms of driving pipeline and revenue. But I'm curious, your thoughts and how you see that all come together with respects to goals, as it's true of, what it was in the past, where all VPs of marketing predominantly were just looking at mostly leads and MQLs, whereas now we're not, I think, in that world anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the way that you guys do it, but I'm curious.
Yeah, well, and I think it shifts because volume, if you look at just what you said, right? If you're thinking solely volume and not about your conversion rates, then there's a lot of waste. And right now in a challenging economy, marketers have nothing to waste. There's
no
just
room.
They can't do that. And so I think when you look at it solely like an MQL lead gen type of model, it's easily a volume game. And then, the conversion rates, and you just get into these really awkward conversations with your head of sales because you're like, I delivered thousands of MQLs. And they're like, okay, well, these MQLs.
What happened? What happened next? That's great. We did that. Yeah.
And so you get into these awkward conversations. So what we think about two things, right, is the quality. And so we aligned, with my head of sales, we're like, okay, what is that ICP? Who are those accounts that we're going after? And you can have that, people say the convergence of ABM and demand gen, et cetera. And I think really where I think about it, I'm like, you have to, and depending the type of business that you're in, but especially for TrustRadius, it's we have a target account list. We know, our ICP, who's going to have that higher propensity to buy and find value working with us. And those are the people we prioritize and we go after. And, and so when you think about that and you think about the quality of the people that you want to go after and people that actually want to buy from you. Because I think the other thing too is that marketers spend a lot of time on people that are not even in market. And they're like, oh, we have garbage conversion rates at the bottom of the funnel. Well, it's because there's probably a lot of people that are in market that you're not even capturing. And that's because you're not using the right intent data. You're not working with, third-party forums where they're doing tons of their research. Because if we go back to the buyer research, again, they want product level content they don't want sales to be the gatekeeper of that anymore. They want they want to be able to just find that. They want to find pricing. They want to find, demos. They want to find, your peer reviews, and then they want to validate that. And so the more you can give them that information and you make that shortlist and then you reach out to them at that right time when they're in market, that's where you're going to improve those conversion rates. And then you don't have to worry about so much of the volume of lead gen. You can focus on, again, just a content strategy and consumption, because you're these people, if I continue to feed them this content and I can continue to nurture them, when they go and they're actually in market and they start doing this research and I have the intent data and I'm present on these third-party forums that they're doing that research, and then I can convert them. Great. That becomes a lot more of an efficient model than, hey, I'm going to go after all of these people, create, thousands of MQLs, and then I have a 3% conversion rate at the bottom of the funnel. And you're like, well,
right. If you're lucky. Yeah. Sometimes even lower than that. It's scary to look at some of those things once you actually open up CRM and start looking at the data. So then I'm sure you look at the whole funnel, but is the primary measure of success for you as a leader at TrustRadius pipeline, or is it revenue, or is it a little bit of everything?
It's kind of three, to be honest, and it's expanded. So when I came on, it was I came on to kind of rebuild the whole marketing department, and a big piece of that was the demand gen engine. And so I really, really focused on demand gen and getting that pipeline fixed. And now
Yeah.
I'm really focused on the revenue, win rates, and then growing and retaining our customers. And so at the end of the day, like that's, I think marketers are focused on four things, right? They're trying to build their brand preference. Like they want people to see their brand and want to align themselves to it. They want to build pipeline. They want higher win rates, right? They want the closed one, and then they want to grow their customers.
Exactly.
And so everything you do ladders into those four buckets. And it just sometimes one is more, in a severe situation than the other. So you have to kind of focus on that. And so I think, in a challenging economy, a lot of marketers that I talk to are like, we got to retain the base. Like we have to keep our customers. We need to keep making sure that they see value, because right now everybody's starting to reevaluate their tech stack and what they're spending money on. And if they don't see a clear path to value and ROI, you're kind of on that list where you're being reevaluated. And so a lot of people are really kind of surrounding their customer base, because that's what's going to help them get through this recession. And then they're thinking about, okay, I think where maybe marketers kind of have a blind spot and maybe don't focus as much is the win rate. Like, why aren't we closing these deals? Because depending on how you model pipeline, your win rate is a direct reflection of how much pipeline you need to build. And so the more you can increase that win rate and enable your sales team and think about the plays that you're running to close those deals, the more efficient your pipeline will be.
Yeah, less pipeline you need, less leads you need. So now we can reduce those things and just increase the quality and the conversion rate of the funnel. And all of a sudden, wow, now we don't have to sit here running around like crazy, or maybe spend the budget that we were spending before to generate all those leads.
Exactly. So I think that there's just a ton of inefficiency when it comes to like the handoff of sales and that sales cycle, and marketers kind of like, okay, build the pipeline, see you later, and so I think when you get to world-class organizations, it's where the marketer is still involved through the sales cycle and really helping them understand, okay, where are the pitfalls along this deal cycle? How can we help you? What are the plays that we can build? What are the customer stories that we can bring in? Again, how do we continue to nurture them? Even if they're open pipeline, you continue to nurture them through that journey and increase those win rates. And that's how that's where I really see, where you see that kind of, where they say marketing and sales alignment. I think that's huge. It's really huge.
I want to end on one thing, and then I know we're just a little bit over time, so end on one little thing. But you mentioned it before. You said that you came in and you really kind of trying to focus on pipeline initially with TrustRadius. And I was curious if there were like any specific programs or maybe things you did, whether it be a strategy or a tactic or something that maybe someone can take away and think about that's maybe a little bit different. Because I think we all want the same thing, right? Like you said, I mean, ultimately, no marketers in the business of just generating a bunch of shitty leads and passing to sales, right? Like that creates a bad relationship. No one wants that. Like we all want the same thing. We want our companies to grow. We want to send good leads to sales, and we want them ultimately to close them, right? But anything specific that you guys have done either recently, maybe in the last few months, in terms of like a marketing campaign or program that you guys have put out that you feel is driving better pipeline for TrustRadius?
Yeah. So when I think about, I'll just say when I first started and going full circle around content strategy, there wasn't a lot of content that we were putting out in the market, and so I was like, so people that were inbounding, they weren't necessarily qualified. They didn't really understand what TrustRadius did. They weren't really thinking about how we differentiated from our competitors. And so one of the things that I really thought about is like, okay, we need a content strategy that's going to address the biggest issues that our sales team is having in the sales cycle. And so that was and it sounds kind of like a little kind of in the theory zone, but it's like, okay, they're having really big issues with our competitors. Great. Let's create pages. Let's create one pagers that shows the difference between us and our competitors. Like these kind of like small wins that you can make when you're thinking about, okay, if people are inbounding, we had actually a pretty good like inbounding flow, but we couldn't either quite book the meeting, or once they got into a meeting, we couldn't get them from a sales accepted lead to an actual open opportunity. And so when you're thinking about pipeline, and when the sales team is talking to them and actually being a qualified opportunity, what are the things that are holding us back? What are the objections that we're hearing? Creating playbooks for that was one of the main things that we did. And then we started to create all this other kind of content upstream of that to displace our competitors, right? You want to deposition them. And like, what are the things that they don't like about your competitors? Okay, well, and those are actually our differentiators. Okay, well, you should create content that depositions them. You don't have to like call them out, and and it doesn't it's kind of you versus them, but it's like here's that people don't like about your competitors. Like, really hone in on that, and then have content that is showcasing your solution and how it differs from, like, they don't have to be on whatever we always say. A lot of our competitors are all about volume. You have to get X amount of reviews,
right?
You're kind of on this hamster wheel. Nobody likes to be on a hamster wheel, so it's like
no one
wants to do that. So it's like display like deposition them in that way and show that you don't really need a bunch of volume on TrustRadius. You just need quality content that buyers want.
Exactly. Totally agree. I think well said. Yeah, I think what you said is interesting. So creating content that helps differentiate and then handle some of the objections that sales is getting. And the only way you can do that is by talking to sales or reviewing recordings of calls or whatever it may be. And then I assume whether it be gated, ungated, whatever the point is, shoot the content out there to the ICP, make sure that they're well aware of that. And also too, like to your point, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, that a lot of times a competitor's better or worse. It's just that there's different things about it that may be a better fit for that specific person, right? Exactly. So it may just be that the things that you're differentiating on, these cool things about TrustRadius, well, I like those more than I like these other review sites. And I really want to talk to TrustRadius about it. So I think that's the important thing. And the better people understand that, the easier they can make a decision, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So cool. Good stuff. Well, I still wanted to go down so many other lines, but we got to call it at some point here. So thanks so much for jumping on for a bit. And I guess we'll see each other out on the LinkedIn ecosphere here.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was great chatting with you.
All right. Cheers. All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of Omni Lab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of Omni Lab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website. That's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.